Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event today, conversation, reading and a conversation with novelist Sahar Mustafah, who's joining us from Chicago. My name is Khalid Matawa. I'm the Director of Arab and Muslim American Studies at U of M in the Department of American Cultures, and I'm also professor in the English department. Welcome, Sahar. So glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the invitation, Khalid. It's been a long time that you and I have been in a space together. So I'm taking this virtual one. It's all right. I know we'll gather physically soon.
It has been a while.
Yeah. And just a real deep gratitude for University of Michigan and all of the clubs, AMAS. I know that this is also an April selection for the Muslim Student Association. So thank you so much, folks, for engaging in this book. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to introduce you. It's an honor to do so. Sahar Mustafah is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants, richly complicated inheritance she explores in her fiction. We'll come back to that. Sahar earned her MFA in fiction from Columbia College in Chicago, where she was a Follett graduate scholar. Sahar's short story collection, Code of the West, received the David Friedman Award for Best Fiction, 2016 Grand Prize winner for prose in the Willow Books Literature Awards. And for that book, Sahar was named one of the 25 writers to watch by the Guild Literary Complex of Chicago. On Code of the West, author David Muir wrote, the native and immigrant Palestinians in Sahar Mustafah's Code of the West live in a world where the threat of violence is part of their existence. Some of these characters exist within their own ethnic enclave, while others travel beyond the unexpected locations. Well, we see that in the novel of today. What deeply resonates are the ways Mustafah captures the textures of her characters' lives, the atmosphere of their homes and families, certain quiet scenes where some unexpected connection or depth of feeling enters, and we are reminded of Chekhov's observation that heartbreak or great changes can arrive at the most ordinary of moments. Again, everything that David Muir says applies to the beauty of your face. He's talking about, of course, Code of the West. And the assignation by the Chicago Guild of Sahar as one of the writers to watch was very prophetic. Sahar's subsequent book, which we'll be discussing today, The Beauty of Your Face, is not only a remarkable and brilliant, it has also received much wide acclaim. Considered one of the best fiction by women in 2020 by Marie Claire, again, a widespread circulation magazine, but they have that right. Read of the Rest for the Rest of Us, feminist books coming out in 2020 by Ms. Magazine. And if you're into the literary world, most anticipated books of 2020 by LitHub. In The Beauty of Your Face, Afaf Rahman is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants. She's the principal of Nuruddin School for Girls, a Muslim school in the Chicago suburbs. One morning, a shooter, radicalized by the online alt-right, attacks the school. As Afaf listens to his terrifying progress, we are swept back through her memories, the bigotry she faced as a child, her mother's dreams of returning to Palestine, and the devastating disappearance of her older sister that tore her family apart. Still, there is the sweetness of the music from her father's oud and the hope and community Afaf finally finds in Islam. Beauty of the Face is a profound and poignant exploration of one woman's life in a nation at odds with its ideals. Many wonderful reviews from Publishers Weekly. Mustafah's arresting debut about a mass shooting at a Muslim girls' school grapples with issues of faith, identity, hatred, and forgiveness. This inviting topical tale will stay with readers. Kirkus review, Mustafah's novel is frequently moving, especially in her depiction of Afaf's inner state, which I'd love to explore with you, Sahar. The sections of the book that describe Afaf's early life are especially vivid, and the sort of the cherry on top of the acclaim is that The Beauty of Your Face was named one of the New York Times notable books of 2020. So wonderful and deserved recognition. Sahar is a member of Voices of Protest and Radius of Arab American Writers, and that's where I met her, had the pleasure of meeting her and working with her. I first encountered Sahar's work while editing Dina Azad's Children, novel of Arab American fiction, and then she joined Rawi's board of directors and brilliantly arranged our affairs with impeccable professionalism. Yes, indeed. And she came to Ann Arbor twice for that. Sahar is joining us from Chicago, where she's an educator and where she lives with her family. Sahar, welcome to Ann Arbor again, though virtually. We are thrilled to have you with us to discuss your beautiful book. I just wanted to, in the format, I've asked Sahar to read, various sections from the book to kind of walk us through it. And she'll talk a little bit, and then she'll read a little bit, she'll talk a little bit and read a little bit. And after that, I'll shoot off a few questions and then open the Q&A for the audience. So Sahar, the floor is yours. I'll if I need to intervene in anything, I will, but otherwise I'm sure we're all in good hands in such a masterful hakawati such as yourself.
So, thank you.
Welcome.
And please do interject if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, Khaled. And thanks again to everyone who's here. So I'm going to read from a few different sections. I'm going to begin in the section that is 1976, when Afaf is 10 years old. For those of you not familiar with the book, we start in the present tense when Afaf is an adult. She is principal of Nuruddin School. And then, she hears what she first thinks is fireworks. And it's because this school is just constantly harassed by, bullies in this predominantly white neighborhood. And then she discovers moments later that they are gunshots. And as you can imagine, quite terrifying. And then we are swept back in time. So we begin in 1976. Her older sister, Neda, has disappeared. 24 hours later, 2 white police officers, a man and a woman, arrive at the apartment, and a word is tossed around: runaway. In most of these cases, teenagers disappear for a few days if they're mad at their folks, one officer tells them. They wait for Afaf's parents to offer any details of an embroiling argument. She is happy, Mama declares, tears streaming down her face. Baba guides her to a kitchen chair. Afaf isn't sure that's true. She pictures Neda and her white friends in their bedroom. The record player stays on an endless loop of Made in the Shade. She kicked Afaf out and threatened to beat her if Afaf persisted in knocking on the door. How many times had she caught Neda rolling her eyes at the other girls when Mama interrupted them, asking if they were staying for dinner, a pot of makluba emitting the pungent aroma of fried cauliflower and eggplant? Or how many times had she observed her sister's cheeks flush with embarrassment when Mama, in her nightgown and dingy house slippers in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, answered the door to a classmate who'd come to work with Neda on a school project? And her parents never let her sister go to sleepovers, though Neda begged Mama every time she received an invitation. A young girl never sleeps outside of her father's home. Shame! Mama's green eyes blazed at Neda. These were the only occasions when she became upset with her firstborn. There was a standoff in the kitchen one time over a camping trip. Neda and Mama the same height. They are opposites in every other way. Mama's soft hair escapes from a loose braid down her back, while barrettes barely contain Neda's thick waves. Mama's complexion is like a pale custard. Neda's skin is an olive hue, the same as Afaf's. But it doesn't matter to Mama. Neda is her world. After giving up the fight, Neda slammed their bedroom door shut, startling Afaf, who laid sprawled on the floor reading the pinballs, a book she checked out from the library. It had been Neda who'd taken her to get a library card, who'd shown her where to print her name and guided her to the fiction shelves for books Afaf had instantly loved before she even read them. Her sister threw herself on her bed. I can't stand it here. I hate her. I hate both of them. Afaf didn't speak while her sister seethed, afraid Neda would pounce on her. Don't you hate it here? Neda demanded. We're Americans, but they don't want us to act like it. Afaf had silently considered this, never having quite felt like she ever belonged, the same way Julie McNulty and Amber Reeves fit into the world like perfect puzzle pieces. And there was Mama, too, who seemed to love Neda most. Afaf squeezes in and out of places, trying not to make a noise around the apartment and at school. But Neda is bold and fearless, so different from her, so different from Mama. Perhaps such a burden would make any child want to run away, Afaf thinks as the officers question her parents. Perhaps Neda had endured enough from the time she was required to ask strangers for directions on buses because her mother couldn't summon the words or courage. Please, Baba tells the officers. Neda is a good girl. She'd never run away. Are her belongings or any personal items gone? The female officer's thick body strains against her uniform, one designed for a man. Her ash blonde hair is pulled into a bun at the base of her cap. Static crackles through her walkie-talkie. Afaf has already checked. Most of Neda's clothes are still in the wooden dresser Baba brought home from the Salvation Army. Afaf is allotted only one to Neda's two drawers. The bottom one is broken, and that's where she found her sister's diary. Neda wrote in it every night, shooing Afaf out of their room before she took it out and later stowed it away. On a hunch, Afaf carefully slid open the lopsided drawer. Wrapped in a red banana is Neda's diary. Bandana is Neda's diary. But she doesn't tell anyone she found it. She slipped it under her own mattress for the time being. Did your daughter have a boyfriend? The male officer asks. He's a head taller than Baba with pork chop sideburns. He's chewing gum, smacking it between sentences. A fella we might talk to? Boyfriend? Baba looks confused. Neda does not have boyfriend. Maybe not one you're aware of, sir. The female jots down something on her notepad. Her friends might be of help on that point, she says to her partner. The officer nods, smacking his gum. Against your religion, sir? Well, it's... Baba falters. Afaf cringes. Her parents' humiliation and fear shrink the apartment. The police officers loom over them, exchanging disapproving smirks. Majid huddles next to her in the doorway of their parents' bedroom. We'll go have a talk with our friends, the female officer says. Afaf sees something deflate in Baba. He nods at the officers. There is nothing more to say. This frightens Afaf. Baba is the strong one, not given to hysterics like Mama. The look of despair on his face shifts something in Afaf's stomach. When Mama sees the police officers close their pads, she starts to wail. No, no, you must bring her back. Please, she my baby girl, my Neda. Baba peels her away and forcibly sits her down on the kitchen chair. He walks behind the officers who are already heading out the back door. Afaf follows them, halting at the top of the stairs. Mrs. Blakely, the landlady, is standing halfway inside her door, holding it open as she speaks to the police. I don't want any trouble, Afaf hears the old woman say. Nothing like that, ma'am, the male officer assures her. So that is the end of that section. I think that particular section does a few things. It reveals primarily the event that basically is going to fracture this family. We have a sense that Mama Muntaha, Afaf's mother, is already struggling with coming to America and really just not adapting the way Baba has. But we also discover that Afaf does not harbor the same feelings that her sister does in terms of rejecting Mama and Baba, rejecting everything that she associates with being Arab. In fact, Afaf, as I read, is just sort of between spaces, and her white counterparts, don't give her the sense of belonging and affirmation that perhaps Neda receives from her teenage friends. And we see later on that even teachers reject Afaf to a degree by not advocating for her. She is innately a very strong reader and does not have the kind of teacher support that would really nurture that. So, you know, ultimately, I wanted to write a story in which we do get the narrative of the daughter of immigrants. And actually, we discover that Neda is also an immigrant because Baba and Mama have her before they leave Palestine. But you know, mostly growing up in Chicago, Neda, you know, has really rejected her family. But that's just one narrative. So I was also really interested in, you know, what happens when you still don't, you know, find your place, and what happens when your heritage is actually the place where ultimately you do feel the most belonging. And with Ataf, we also find that in her religion, you know, when she is on this journey that she begins in high school. So yeah, a lot of, I think, different things are established there. And this relationship between Afaf and her mother is one that, quite frankly, was challenging to write. People think it's the shooter frame that was most difficult for me, and it wasn't. It was actually this relationship that Afaf has with Mama, because I'm also, you know, besides grief, you know, at losing a daughter and being away from her homeland, Mama, we discover, is also suffering from some mental health issues, and they just become more and more pronounced over the years. And that is actually the next section I was going to read from, unless Khalid, you will interject. So at this point, Afaf has found the circle of women who are going to become great mentors to her. They set her on a path in which becomes an educator, a teacher. And you know, Afaf, you know, first feels this intense feeling of belonging before she even adopts the rituals of Islam. In fact, she doesn't even begin wearing the hijab until she is an adult later on. So it's a very good friend in high school who welcomes her into this sort of makeshift mosque, this masjid, which Afaf's family has been a part of, but not as regularly as these other Arab Americans in the community. So Afaf remembers this particular space, which is basically, you know, on top of a clinic. It feels very much like a flat, like an apartment. And then that particular group goes on to build the first mosque in a suburb of Chicago. So Afaf is welcomed by this circle of women without judgment, without question. And that is happening at a time when she's just really wrecking herself in her teenage years, making really terrible decisions, allowing white boys to use her. And it becomes a problem for her immediate Arab community, because those teenage girls don't want to have anything to do with her, because, you know, she is just not, you know, of the same standards and values that they are upholding. So not only is she rejected by white community, but also by her Arab community. So this is now when she is in her 20s. And this is just to get at her relationship with Mama. So she comes home, and it's after her big hijab party, and a Mama is not having it at all. Like she just will not have anything to do with the circle of women who have tried over the years to welcome her into their folds. And so Afaf comes home in this particular scene to Mama, who she can see is growing more and more agitated. When Afaf gets home, Mama's at the kitchen table sipping a cup of coffee. On the same old portable television, she watches Good Morning America and Phil Donahue. She stays in the kitchen all day, cleaning and cooking and watching game shows, wiping down the counter though it's spotless. At night, she closes her bedroom door and watches more TV on another set Baba bought her. No matter which room she's in, the sound of the television obliterates the quiet, as though her mother can't stand to be alone with her thoughts. Alf Mabruk, Mama says, green eyes gleaming with sarcasm. Congratulations on the final step of your conversion. May the Lord redeem your soul. It's the same contemptuous tone she heard at the gas station. Raghead. Mama grabs her mug and rinses it at the sink. The hem of her black abaya sweeps the floor, her long sleeves wide and flowing. The bodice is stitched in silver and gold, and the open collar contains loops of tiny embroidered flowers. It's one of a dozen that Khalti Nasreen has brought back for Mama from the Blad. The last grievance, the most offensive, Afaf realizes, is Baba's journey to Hajj last year. With contributions from the center, her father had gathered several thousands of dollars and flew to Mecca to fulfill one of the most sacred pillars of Islam. It would have cost less to purchase a ticket for Mama to fly to Palestine with a few $100s put aside for gifts for her family. How can you deny what Allah has pressed upon us, Ya Muntaha? Baba says to Mama. But Afaf understands it's not really about religious obligation or even money. She recognizes the same vague fear in Baba's eyes. If he lets Mama go, she'll never return. Mama's father passed away shortly after she married. Her mother died last year from pneumonia. It had been over 20 years since Mama had last seen her. A framed picture of her sits on Mama's dresser. In it, Afaf's grandmother wears a tailored dress suit with broad shoulders and carries an infant in her arms. Khalti Nasreen, the last of her children. A little girl, Mama, timidly stares at the camera, clutching the hem of her mother's jacket. Afaf wonders what that little girl in the photograph was thinking. Had Mama already predicted her life as a woman? Was that what made her expression so glum? As customary, Khalti Nasreen hosted an evening of mourning in her house in Kenosha, and she and Mama received friends and distant relatives, bearing their condolences and offering aluminum foiled wrapped dishes full of rice and vegetables. The masjid sent a carton of fresh palm dates and a small donation. Afaf helped Khalti Nasreen serve the bitter, unsweetened coffee in tiny Demitas cups, while Majid and Baba sat with the men in the living room, Baba thumbing his musfaha, an onyx set of beads he'd brought home from Hajj. Her brother stared at his feet. Ammo Yahya was showing a colleague an ancient map of Jerusalem that he found at a street art fair in Milwaukee. In the kitchen where the women gathered, Mama wrung tissue paper in her hands, moaning about not seeing her mother before she died, complaining how it should have been her duty to host the Aza as the oldest daughter. But how could she when her apartment was so tiny it could barely hold the immediate family? Khalti Nasreen's girlfriends stole glances at each other, eyebrows cocked in disapproval. Khala, sister, Khalti Nasreen snapped at Mama. She arranged a platter of fresh dates and handed it to Afaf. Inshallah, God has mercy on our mother's soul. Since her mother's passing, Mama has become more unhinged. She'll go days without showering, and Baba or Afaf have to gently remind her, steering her toward the bathroom, turning the faucet on, helping her undress. She stares listlessly until Afaf pulls back the plastic shower curtain and invites her in. Do you think I'm an imbecile? I can take care of myself, she snaps, alert and disdainful. On a bad day, Mama spends an hour scouring the stovetop with an SOS pad. She's already scrubbed off most of the laminate on the burner trays. Then she stands at the sink and plucks out the tiny wires from her fingertips, her slender hands scalded red from running them under hot water. Today, Afaf's worried. Mama tends to wear the black abaya when she's in a particularly foul mood. Afaf must be cautious. Any gesture, any word could set Mama off. Her mother's like a caged tiger, gorgeous and deadly. And I'll just stop there in that particular section. I was really interested in investigating, what happens to a family when they lose something. In this particular case, her sister, Afaf's sister Neda, has not returned, and Mama becomes increasingly unhinged and descending into her grief, and so is not able to mother Afaf in the way that, we expect mothers, to perform. And I think it's something that can be difficult for readers. I think most of the stories that I have read by Arab Americans, by Muslim writers, the mother is very much the anchor in a family, the figure who is also going to raise the children, Islamically, or at least morally, if it's not a Muslim mother. And we have someone like Mama, like Muntaha, who sort of shatters that particular image that we have. And we discover that it's actually Baba upon whom Afaf leans. And I have to admit, I really loved writing Baba because he also shatters an incredibly negative stereotype of Arab Muslim men who are just really oppressive, and just don't allow the other female characters, the women in the family, to breathe, to be who they want to be. And so it was quite satisfying writing someone who I think, especially for non-Arab and non-Arab audience, someone who does not meet those expectations. And that was quite gratifying. The last part, and this one is kind of short, so thank you for giving me this time, is towards the end of the novel, after Afaf has survived the shooting and has basically decided that she is going to go and meet with the shooter, who is now in prison. And this is against her family's uh, admonitions, and they just don't want her to have anything to do with him in life after this situation. And her therapist also strongly tries to dissuade her. The female guard pats Afaf's body, examines the folds of her hijab, fingers crunching the fabric around her neck. All right, go ahead. A male guard gestures to her and she passes through a metal detector. They search the contents of her purse on a metal table. The guard holds up a packet of breath mints. You can't take these in. He throws them away and they clink against the inside of a large metal trash bin. Another guard motions to her. Okay, walk along that corridor line. She reaches an area that reminds her of the DMV. There are mostly women here, young and middle-aged, standing in lines cordoned off by rope. Everyone looks tired, as though they've been waiting a long time. The queue moves slowly. When it's her turn, Afaf offers her driver's license and a copy of her birth certificate. She fills out the prisoner's name and her own. The clerk scrolls on a computer screen, then looks up at her more intently now, recognizes her from the news. Wait over there, she tells Afaf. What do you hope to gain from this? That's what her therapist asked her. After weeks of sessions, Afaf revealed she wanted to visit the shooter. Her therapist is much younger than Afaf, a white woman who wears false eyelashes and sips Starbucks coffee with one hand and takes notes with the other on a legal pad propped across her lap. She suggests that Afaf keep a journal to chart her daily emotions. At their first session, she asked Afaf whether therapy was discouraged in her religious culture. Afaf hates the sessions where she turns herself inside out, but she still goes. She can tell the stranger all the things she keeps from Bilal, her nightmares, her constant fear that someone will lash out at her in public places. And she confessed her desire to speak to the shooter. But how will seeing him help your recovery, Afaf? You're making great progress here. Progress is defined in small, achievable goals. Taking a walk around her neighborhood once a day, leaving the house at least 3 times a week to run an errand, and eventually return to her job at Nuruddin School for Girls. But for the time being, it's unfathomable to Afaf. She can't go back, not without reasons, not without understanding. I need to know why, Afaf told her therapist. I don't think we'll ever understand. No, he has to tell me why. And I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Sahar. That was a beautiful reading. And you took us, left sufficient and intriguing gaps in um, in the story. So yeah. So let's actually begin with the end, and maybe just sort of some of the inspiration for the story. This you probably, I think you maybe have done with the novel when the Parkland, Florida school shootings happened at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Sandy Hook actually gets mentioned,
Yeah.
and you know your book of short stories came out around the same time that the Barakat and Abu Sahla killings happened in UNC.
Yeah.
Not in America. We had so many awful events. And the one thing about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is that Afaf's daughter sort of gets kind of some notoriety on social media as the daughter of the survivor, which kind of reminded me of the Parkland school. The Muslim killings are direct sort of. So how did you sort of come up with the story of the shooter and addressing the shooter as a story? And in a way, it's almost like that's like the purely American part of the story, but you connect them together. So can you tell us about and maybe the research involved, how that came about, and so on?
So I did write about gun violence in my short story collection, but it was a different dynamic because it was a young person, just like the Parkland shootings, who is so disenfranchised and then brings a gun to school and has, is on the fringe at that point. But with this one, Khalid, it was inspired by the real life hate killings of Yusor Abu Salha, her husband, Dia Shadi Barakat, and her sister Nizan, who were shot in cold blood by their white neighbor, allegedly because of a parking dispute. And I was just completely rattled. And as so many people were in this country and across the globe. For me, fiction has just always been this space where, I can explore these really horrible things. And it allows me a buffer, quite frankly. So I can investigate the why. That's what I'm really interested in. I think when people just read a synopsis or even begin to, get to the shooter's passages, they, I think, are worried that, it's going to be graphic or, that I'm somehow justifying the shooter by giving him page time. And that I don't think is at all, what happens. And that's not at all my intention. It's really just trying to understand. I'm so interested in our origin stories. What are all the choices? What are all the forces that bring us to these really critical moments in time? So I saw the shooter very clearly in my first draft, but I had focused on multiple Muslim American characters. And, for whatever reason, I just was not getting close to them. And I think it was because I did stay, in this contemporary time. And that, I guess that would have been okay. But I realized that if I was going to address a hate crime of this, magnitude, I'd have to go back, and I couldn't not include the why of the shooter. And again, I just saw him very clearly. But then when I sort of let that draft go, I was sort of pouting a whole summer because it wasn't successful. I had an epiphany, and then Afaf came to me, and I started to see her very clearly. And I saw a school. My first setting was actually just like at a 5K run. It was going to be like a fundraiser. But I think that might also have sprung from being a teacher myself, which has actually helped in terms of the research. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But when I saw Afaf as a teacher principal, I could then start to see where she had come from. And it was just quite an amazing journey, to go back in time, to experiences that uh, you know I could identify with. I was a child of the late 70s and 80s, and this is not my autobiography, but there are things that I have fictionalized, experiences, firsthand, secondhand, things in my immediate community. But again, fiction allows me, that buffer, and to investigate things um, in this really imaginative way. So I feel also privileged. There was definitely a concern about appropriating trauma, but I wanted to tell what you called also this very American story, and I think that's probably also the way it's sort of blurbed on the back here. But I was also heartened that they called her a Palestinian American. I think maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I didn't want to do any real in-depth research for the shooter in terms of the radicalization, because I wanted to see him first. And that's what I do with all of my writing. I will spend time developing them, fleshing them out, seeing them, humanizing them before I start to delve into the research, because I just didn't want him to be this artificial. And yeah, I think there are some textbook things that an audience is going to recognize, but I just wanted to get close to those stories that bring him face to face with Afaf, as I did with, Afaf. I can tell you that he originally had the same length chapters, but in the editorial process, those were basically trimmed. But had I not written those longer chapters, I wouldn't have been able to distill him in the way that I think, really, really presented him, I hope, in this, for lack of a better word, this three-dimensional way. But I don't name him. So again, I had to set boundaries, because no matter what, he ends up, massacring, these young innocent girls in this Muslim American school. Naming him would have just been too close for comfort for me. And so there was a lot of research in terms of even handling the gun and things like that, but that came, much later, after, again, I had sort of developed this intimate relationship with him. And then a lot of research went into mostly the Hajj, journey. And I was so grateful, because I found these online blogs of women, these female pilgrims, and they were so beautiful. So of course I could have done any sort of like Wikipedia, and there are many things that have been published about the rites during the pilgrimage, but those blogs, those diaries really gave me that intimate experience, because I've never done it, have never set foot in Saudi Arabia. So that was pretty incredible.
Well, I mean, the other side of that, just continuing with the American story, is that, I mean, being in a university, the whole shooter issue is not like, we've had one incident here where it was apparently nothing. But in schools, it's a much sort of much greater reality that you probably get trained on it, or thinking about it constantly. So it's that combination. Of course, the other side of this is the sort of the multiple complexities. Every family worries about runaway children. There, in some ways, in American lore, it has become much less. That at 18, boy or girl, you're on your way out, hitchhike your way to your independence. That sort of has kind of disappeared a little bit from the American mythological representation. And of course, the kids are going away. They can't afford to, you can't get insurance. So I mean, so the reality of American children as they're growing up is that many of them are staying at home. So there's that, but the nightmare of a runaway child is sort of multiplied when it comes to a daughter from a Muslim background.
Yeah.
So where's the research there, or because that's also depicted very well, and it does, Muntaha was in trouble. She's traumatized, yearning, mental issues, but then with the disappearance of her daughter, who had been kind of her anchor.
Yeah.
So, is there any particular research that you did, particularly for the Muslim American families, Palestinian American families, what that meant, and the context of that?
That mostly came from personal and then anecdotal, Khaled. So when I was coming up, I must have been maybe 8 or 9 years old when my older sister Hala's best friend comes over to our house. And, we're all sitting outside. It's summertime. We're on the stoop, and she's just bawling. And, she shares with us that her sister had run away. And I was terrified, Khaled. So I wasn't even sure, what the implications of that was. All I knew was, or all that stayed with me was just turning to my mom, and my mom, just doing, those real Arab things of la, la, la. And, all that. And just those things that have, just sort of stayed with me about the terror, because I don't know that I imagine them always living as we see Nada, not to be a spoiler, because we never heard about them again. There were a few over the years who might have come back, who were, reconciled and so on. But I would say in my immediate circles, they didn't. And in fact, I saw that good friend of my sister's. Our children actually went to school later on. We were then in the suburbs of Chicago. And can I tell you, Khaled, it still hung on her. And, maybe I imagined that, maybe I was projecting that, but to me, that was such a painful, traumatic story that was always on my mind. It was the first time that I wrote about it in this way, in this book. And that became quite fitting when I saw Afaf, when she started to materialize for me, because I wanted to, before the shooter, before we even see her as a woman wearing hijab, as a quote hijabi woman, I wanted to present again all of the things that she carried, and this was one of them that changed her, in a way that I have to say I was spared, because it didn't happen to me, directly. Like this did not happen to any of my siblings, but we were always haunted. The other thing was what it meant for a Muslim Arab family, and sort of the shame that was attached to that. And then how that just, compounded parents' fear in this country and having to protect their Arab girls. I can say now, Khaled, and you're also the father of a daughter. To me, I'm having quite a different experience. I've had to sort of, as progressive as I feel I am, I had to sort of let those things go that I inherited, that sense of, keeping daughters close, and what did that mean? And I feel differently about that, but that parting with those things was actually painful, and I know that they still linger for me. I feel like Azmiya is basically the most positive kind of generational shift, because they own their identity. Yeah, Afaf's daughter, they own their, Muslimness. They own their Arabness. Afaf didn't get that opportunity. And we see with Neda, it was a completely failed experiment of assimilation. And I have to say, my heart is heavy, because I can only imagine what it was like for my parents, who were so afraid that their heritage, their sense of home would be obliterated if they didn't keep daughters close. Because, daughters also, we were also sort of the vessel, right? We're the channel of heritage. We're the ones who are going to pass that along, and fathers too, of course, no doubt. But there is this real intimate relationship that the mother has with those things that, they carry and that they're then going to pass down. So yeah, I would say, I didn't have to do formal research. I did maybe just a little bit when it came to the shooter, because he also loses his brother, right? And I have to say, I wasn't really deliberately thinking about that. There are some parallels between the shooter and Afaf, but there's that section where he's reading those ads about people who have gone missing, right? And again, I mean, I wrote it, but I was still feeling goosebumps, and like you said, maybe we don't see it so much. And even now, though, maybe we're more likely to be found, if we are wanting to be found, but then if we're also searching, it feels like we have all those tools, we've got Facebook, for crying out loud, and with Neda, she finds, she connects because of a listserv before Facebook, at that point. And it is a wonderful thing, but her being disappeared the whole time is sort of a shadow, over Afaf's life, for sure.
Yeah. Well, this is again not a spoiler, and this is sort of a last question for me, or is that Afaf ends up marrying Bilal, who's Bosnian American Muslim. In some ways, it's kind of a similar saga. The Bosnians left after the breakup of Yugoslavia. They're not likely to go back, so they're kind of settling in. Stories of dispossession. They meet through the context of religion, which probably neither one of them had as a resource. And so in a way, there's a kind of a transitioning as to the family is not the network. The network of the Palestinian sort of family network is not what brought these two together. It is religion. In a way, the family does break up. Muntaha goes back. Majid, her brother, is sort of on his own. Nada disappears, but then the Afaf steps in and becomes the mother who fills in for the female who fills in for the mother, and she creates a community, a different kind of community, and maybe I guess maybe a little bit of transitioning of from. Maybe I thought of it this way, but sort of like the growing greater importance of religion as a factor of identity, and then maybe possibly nationality in this story. So do you have a take on that, or why did you have her marry a Bosnian guy, I guess is my question. And how would that impact her life?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Say that last part again, Khaled.
But it was a very interesting choice for you to have her marry Bosnian, and that they become sort of an Islamic sort of union, which is interesting.
Yeah. And interestingly, I was in an interfaith book club, and it was a really wonderful experience. But one of the club members said, when I read the back, and I thought it was going to be a book about Palestine. He basically said, he's like, it wasn't really. And I thought, oh, so is this not like a Palestinian book? And then you raise it here, and I think it was really important for me to assert at the beginning that she was Palestinian. And I know where that comes from. I think it feels in many ways this responsibility to assert an identity that is so fraught, and, just so problematic for others, that I was thrilled that, like I said, there was even the blurb that mentioned, that she's like Palestinian American. I'm like, yes, my editor, they're not going to give me shit about this. This is great. I'm not going to have to defend that. But I knew kind of that it was going to be a book about Islam. And I have to say that surprised me. So because of this horrible tragedy that happened, this book was born. Now, does that mean that I haven't, or would never write about, Islam? No, because that's, I have plenty of short stories that address, quote, hijabi women. But this one really just gave me this beautiful opportunity to expand perceptions of Islam. If just like Baba, it felt so gratifying to also present different kind of backgrounds to the Muslims in this particular masjid, right? So we get Arab Muslims, but then we also get Black Muslims like the Parkers, and I love that because they also reveal the hypocrisy of some of these Arab Muslim grocers who still have liquor stores that are basically allowing wives to drive around in BMWs and things like that, and then having to negotiate that. So I was really happy to expand the perceptions around Muslim communities to present a community that's really nuanced and layered. And Bilal came and I was able to also, I suppose, maybe parallel the Palestinian experience in terms of conflict, oppression because of the genocide. That felt fitting and appropriate that, Afaf, would fall in love with someone who basically had to start over, who had suffered. And maybe in some ways, Bilal carries maybe Mama and Baba's, legacy of Palestine. But, to have them not be Arab, again, was me just expanding, the view of Muslim Americans. And that felt, just really satisfying. And I'm so excited to receive messages from Muslim readers from all over the world, and many of them not Arab, who really identified because of it being a Muslim book. And I feel affirmed. I received messages about how I got it right. And I sat with them like, so what does that mean? And I think it means that I told a story that maybe has not been told yet, that is a familiar, definitely, I like to think new, but again, didn't reinforce those tired stereotypes, around this community. I think what has been so satisfying for especially a white audience is, we want them to turn away from Islam. We want to save them. We want that to be, the narrative. And this isn't about that. We saw that with Neda, and that I felt that was true to me in so many ways. But with Afaf, I wanted to write a story about a woman's journey towards, her heritage, towards her faith, which then I think becomes a real transcendent theme, because some people will tell me it's not just about Islam, it's about finding your faith, finding your community, and all that. And that's great. But I'm so happy to be able to write the story about a young Arab woman who runs towards Islam and not the other way. Like, I hate my family, I wish I was white, which again, we get with Neda, but that's just one story. Here's another one. And I was happy, that I got a chance to tell it.
Great. Okay, everybody, there are two questions in the Q&A. If you would like to, I can start with those, and please add some more some ideas. This is from LA, one of my students who just read the book. How much of Afaf's character is based off the author's own experiences? You mentioned some of that, but maybe you can address some more.
And I appreciate this. I have to say, depending on which space I'm in, sometimes I get defensive at a question like this, Khaled, because I heard this term in January last year, before the pandemic hit, when American Dirt came out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that novel, which is just this, it received so much flack because it's a white woman who told the story of a Mexican family, a mother and a son, who flee the cartel, the drug cartel. And understandably so, people in the Mexican community were so enraged because she had received a real nice, what do you call it? Yes. Yeah. And was, had already gotten the book optioned and all of that, and then I started hearing this term, trauma porn. And I'm like, ooh. And so when people would ask me if it was based on me, I would push back, because I'm like, this seems to be the fantasy, of, again, white readers wanting to read about trauma occurring and inflicted upon BIPOC characters and people. But I do appreciate it as, where does it come from? Where does Afaf come from? And like you said, I talked a little bit about that. So yeah, I would say, if it wasn't me directly, it was certainly from, the experiences that I observed, that I witnessed, some that were closer than others. For example, the hijab party that happens, I went to those and they were great. And there would always be this thing of, inshallah, you're next, Sahar, inshallah, and they were just so beautiful. And, I can say this, they're, my mom struggled with mental health issues, and I don't always bring that up, Khaled, because I worry that that's going to be the center of the conversation. In fact, I had, my editor, my publicist, who said, don't bring that up. We don't want it to go, that direction. And I've learned so much too about the marketing and things like that of this book. But I can say here in this wonderful company that I know that I'm also interested in exploring that in a way that I have not seen in books, and especially by authors that I really love. And I know it's because those stories are limited, and I know we're going to see more for sure. So yeah, a lot of it. And then the other part is, why can I imagine this? Do I not have that proclivity? Can I be an imaginative person? Why can't, writers of color, have that talent? So it's balancing all these things, and I try to say, okay, Sahar, bring it down. You don't always have to be defensive. So I hope that answers that question.
Well, another question is probably perhaps the patterning of or sort of the bilingual nature of the book, because there are lots of Arab phrases that are worked in, khalti, liblad, and these kinds of things. Well, Sam is asking, given there are words in the book that are mainly understood by people from Arab descent, is it safe to assume that the author's main audience are Arab Americans? Do you think that use of Arabic is maybe limiting the audience? Of course, Latino American writers who have Spanish use a lot of Spanish in their fiction. So just maybe putting it within the literary context of American writings. So what do you think?
This is a great question. And I would say, yes, I was definitely writing for my immediate communities, which also made me so nervous when this book came out, because I felt that pressure. I felt that responsibility. And I'm not, people have said, why didn't you include a glossary? And again, some of my favorite Arab American writers have done that. And I don't think I'm ever going to do that. And I've been thinking about that, and I didn't have at Norton, they didn't ask me to, which I thought was, pretty cool. And they didn't ask me to italicize. So I don't italicize any of the words. I used to. So that really speaks to an incredible experience I had with an Indigenous Canadian editor. My work was accepted by a feminist magazine. And the editor had a conversation with me, and she said, listen, Saad, we're not going to italicize. We don't do that here. That's because we're not going to other the othered. We're done with that. And I tell you, it was just this amazing moment of revelation. And, I had been definitely writing to, what we call the white gaze. And I know that I had been doing this on a conscious level, maybe on a subconscious. And it was so great to sort of put that down, and that expectation, down, that responsibility. I'm just not going to worry if you don't understand what that word means, but I am, for all practical and literary purposes, I hope that I offer enough context that doesn't disrupt the narration. And I don't know how many wonderful books I read. I didn't feel the need to Google words that I didn't understand, because I was so swept up in the storytelling that I could guess, and the writer did such a good job. But I'll take the criticism, Khaled. If someone feels like that, those instances were not seamless, but luckily I've only heard that they were, but then more so to me, what meant a lot were readers who said, thank you for not italicizing. It felt like I was talking to my mom. I was talking to my brother. That's exactly what I wanted to achieve. So the short answer is yes. I do write for my immediate audiences. And that's because that's been an audience that has been shut out, has been ignored. And this felt like home. This felt like coming home. And I wanted to honor our culture.
Yeah, but I thought also the major American publisher taking this on as is a sign of the
progress, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the sign that that's the expectation now as you read a novel in the United States, that you're the bilingualism is part of the fact of American life, and everybody has to sort of deal with it. And sort of deal with it in the sense of try to expand their linguistic approach. So you begin with your community, it's part of American experience. Others will enter that space, and as the case with this wonderful book, people are not feeling alienated, but are feeling very welcomed by it, despite the words here and there that they may not understand. A question for Mandru. Again, he refers to a story that we read in our course. Sahar, you mentioned earlier that many of the Arab American stories you've read, the mother has been the anchor of the family. Do you enjoy stories where that position is negative on the protagonist, like Lost in Freaking Yonkers, which is the story by Randa Jarrar, if you know that story?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm flashing back. So is the question, do I appreciate the sort of volatile, contentious kind of mom and daughter? I would say yes. But you know what? I think all my fiction is going to be addressing, contention and conflict. But I will say, though, that I am enamored by healthy, loving female relationships. And I think, we get both here. In fact, that is what Afaf is so desperately craving, which is what, Gokeb attracts. And then, of course, Gokeb opens the door. We see it, though, first with Baba when he takes her, to that sort of makeshift, masjid, that prayer center. So, but again, I think it's also, it feels realistic to me that not every single parental relationship is going to be perfect and unburdened, by conflict. I think, and I even as an adult, I still worried about what my parents thought. So that particular relationship with also expectations is really interesting and really compelling to me. I think with Afaf, we also have this very specific case too of a mother who is also dealing with trauma and loss and the mental health issues. But then we also have a father who's dealing with addiction, but still manages to express love. So I don't shy away, I think, from exploring those kinds of things. And I think that, readers will also offer me grace. I don't think they're going to be completely turned off. I was in a book club where it was, there was the matriarch. So it was, I think, 3 generations. And oh boy, the older generation, they were not having it. They thought Muntaha was a disappointment. So they thought there was no excuse for her to behave this way. But the younger, more my age, members, they really could identify with her struggle and with her strife. So I definitely appreciate the different assessments and people who embrace her and reject her. But again, it just speaks to me wanting to present real complicated and complex relationships in a community that has just, again, been riddled, I think, by tired old stories and narratives.
Question, another, what are some of the driving questions that motivated the shooter's character? What did you hope your audience will get from his point of view?
Great question. I think, and I don't know that we ever get the final answer on the why, why he shoots. I wanted to figure out, again, what all those experiences were that built up and became almost like a tipping point for him. And not in a way that excuses or justifies anything, but I keep coming back to this idea of the origin story. So in the end, I wanted to try to get at, what happens to a human being after they've experienced some devastating loss, because he also grew up in a family that, well, the father was abusive and then his brother just takes off. He never really had a sense of belonging either. And, for me, that became a theme that I can't remember now, Khaled, if I started with that, did I start with, this feeling of not belonging, or did that just sort of then start to come up? But it's one that really fascinates me, and one that, if we could step back and look at, just how wrecked this country is, maybe if we had more of those conversations where we can look at hatred and fear in the face and figure out, well, how do we get there? Why do you feel the way you do? Why do you hate? Why are you afraid of, me being different? And why am I different in your eyes? That kind of thing. I think we would be in a much better place. And I say that also to connect to the Parkland shooter. He had all kinds of issues that were just not addressed, before he decides to bring that gun to school. So yeah, the shooter, I know, is difficult. And for some of us, it's just not going to be a character that we can, swallow. I don't think he ever becomes palatable. But I also want to remind audiences of the daily threat that people like him posed for visibly hijabi women. So anytime, we come to the end of a chapter, I very, deliberately wanted to say, remember, here's this guy. Remember, he's in the school. Remember, there's that danger lurking. And for someone like me, who I don't think anybody even guesses, what my background is, that has at least been my experience, I can move in spaces and not really have to worry about that. But someone like Afaf, and of course, real life Muslim women, cannot. I mean, terrible things continue to happen. And looking at what's going on in France now, and it's just so horrible and just so disgusting, to say the least. But he's not a monster, and I guess that was the other thing that I was trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one of our conversations was like, well, there's the humanity produces all kinds, but where is the sympathy and where is the he's not a monster emphasis? And we wanted to make sure that we, is he only human or is he not a monster? So where's the line? Because when we say that's only human, is like, oh, that's not only human, that's just horrible. And then is a monster? Is he a monster? So there, it's a big kind of gray area. But you don't want to sort of utter forgiveness and then also the utter sort of damnation. There's some sort of space in between. I think the other question there, the Afaf does go see, and it doesn't seem to come to a satisfactory end. I mean, she writes him 43 times. He doesn't want to see her. He agrees, and then even there's like, why did you come? Why did you agree to see me? It's almost like, but the sort of that lack of resolution is probably right on the dot, because there is a lot of curiosity, but there's all he does is he crumbles and he weeps, and she, like, language fails him in that sense. Perhaps it's a sense of sorrow, but it's not an articulate sense of sorrow. It's not even seeking forgiveness, I don't think.
No, and I'm glad you said that. That's actually what I was going to say. I think, people see forgiveness as a major theme, which I think is really beautiful, but the whole prison scene is really her trying to reckon with it. I think even before, we can talk about forgiveness, and even now in this moment, post-Trump, we need to sit with this stuff. So before we even begin to repair, I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to really just sort of look at these issues and again talk about, how did we arrive here? Before we throw up our hands and say, it's time to move on. I don't think so, because the moving on is only going to perpetuate these kinds of really, really terrible, awful events. So for me, I wanted to empower her. To me, she is no longer a victim. She is trying to get control back and trying to sort of decipher and comprehend this horrible act.
All right. Well, we're at an hour and I guess 10 minutes. It's been great. So, and we have great questions. But anyway, so maybe we can just do, TikTok answers.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
When you introduce, this is from Huda, I was in our class also. When you first introduced Neda, we only see her through Afaf's flashbacks and memories, and don't actually directly see her until she returns years later. What was your goal in holding back direct contact between Neda and the reader until she comes back?
Yeah, I deliberately wanted to keep her as a shadow and ghost. And, I wanted us to keep imagining what had happened to her. And I don't know if we were shocked and surprised, or if she sort of fulfills, what we had imagined her just becoming sort of Americanized, but that was deliberate. I wanted us to have a distant relationship with her.
And to explore all the possibilities that can happen in this case. Hamida Riyahi is our mutual friend, probably. Are you in Saudi or in Tunisia, Hamida? Anyway, Hamida writes, hello everybody, Ramadan Kareem. Hamida is working on Arab American literature at the University of Sousse in Tunisia. But she also teaches in Saudi Arabia. Through the story of Afaf, you succeeded to rewrite the Western representations about the Muslim woman in terms of dress, and space, and community. However, in many instances in the novel, Afaf makes, and let me just come for the question, Afaf novel makes questions about whether hijab is necessary. Do you think hijab is necessary in moments where hate crimes arise, such as in post 9/11 events?
I never want to speak to, should a woman, wear hijab? I have to say, for me, it was an affirmation that she refuses to take it off, because I remember that. I remember that time period when close family members and friends were making that decision, or they were sort of altering the hijab. So maybe it was like a bucket hat or something along those lines. And for Afaf, she makes a decision not to, and that felt empowering. So what I would say, Hamida, that I have to be honest, I don't know that I would be that courageous. So I wonder if maybe I would take it off, just because I would be afraid. But Afaf allows me to sort of demonstrate that courage that so many visibly Muslim women, hijabi women, it became a symbol of courage and, empowerment. They were not going to let, 9/11 or anything, any other events to follow, strip them of that identity,
But I think what she's also asking, and I'm sorry to follow up, in this context, can you really write about a Muslim woman without her wearing a hijab? Is the only way to talk about a Muslim woman is that she has to wear a hijab?
Oh, that's a really good question. No. And then, I definitely have written about other characters, who don't. I hope that answers that. Was that the quick?
Yeah, I think that's sort of
okay.
Jumana Al-Talal, one of our MFA poets. Thank you so much, Sahar. I'm an MFA poet here at U of M, and I'm curious about what your experience has been like getting into the head of violence, so to speak. I love what you said about fiction allowing you to investigate the why, and I'm curious to hear how you managed to maintaining the distance between yourself as a writer and the violence you write into, if you did.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I have to be honest, I did not want to investigate the dark web. So I would say that I really stayed on the surface. one book that helped me when I was thinking about the shooter was written by a Norwegian journalist. I think her name is pronounced Esne Arsgaard. She wrote One of Us. She also wrote
about the Norwegian shooter.
Yes,
Yeah.
who basically massacres, a youth socialist camp. Can I tell you that that book was also recommended by a teacher friend of mine, and when I read it, I'm like, my goodness, it was really. I hate to use the word sympathetic, but she follows that particular domestic terrorist in a way that really humanizes him. I know we've been using this word humanize. That's, you know what, Jemana, I needed to hold on to that. If I didn't, it would have just been reduced to sensationalism and just violence. And I couldn't write like that. I didn't want to invest in that kind of thing. But I'll be honest again, I knew my limits. And so there were just going to be websites I just wasn't going to click on. And I had already had a sense of what these websites were like. Just based on, kind of like superficial reading and stuff. And I just sort of protected myself in that way. I'll tell you this, even when he enters the school and then starts to shoot, even that, that was difficult for sure. And there were two, what I would consider fairly graphic details. My editor said, choose one, Sahar, we're not doing both. So that was one of those where my editor was like, nope. In terms of like, also, I suppose respecting, the readers. And I said, okay. And so the one that I went with, that felt satisfactory, I guess. But I have to say, it made me think about, would we still be having the same conversation if I was a male writer? So that, that's a whole other, discussion. But you know what, Jemana, yeah, I definitely engaged in self-care. I knew when to stop reading. And yeah, I think I was pretty cognizant of it.
We have, this is Nida. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. The relation between the young girls and their Baba flashes out Arab fathers in a way that we rarely get in Arabic literature, or maybe in Arab American literature or American literature. Can you kindly expand on that? Like, how did you work on Baba's characterization? I mean, he's a musician, addicted, poor, all of these things, but definitely he and Afaf have a loving relationship. Majid, the son, doesn't really take well to his father, thinks perhaps in almost like an Oedipal switch. Majid thinks father is the cause of mother's trouble, so he doesn't like the father. Nada leaves because of the mother more than the father. So here it's the relationship as a sort of a gentle father, troubled but gentle father. You said you enjoyed writing about that. Is there one thing you want to add about that?
Yeah. And I also have to say, I love the relationship between Majid and Afaf. So even though it's like team mama, team baba, they still are, they maintain a closeness that was also wonderful to write. For me, Baba represents, to put it in simple terms, joy, and something that I'm always, I'm actually more careful of now as a writer. There's got to be that balance of conflict, of, the violence, of trauma. Characters need to have some, degree of happiness or joy in order to get up the next day and to carry the struggle, I suppose. For me, Baba represents so many beautiful things. And that joy comes also as him as the artist. So him representing music and that, and the oud and that part of Arab Palestinian heritage. So, for all of his flaws, he still symbolizes all these really beautiful things that Mama sort of maybe fails at, except maybe with her cooking. So, we get that, part, which for me always feels like home. My sisters and I, we would go to my mom's house. We would prepare meals like the warak doali, the stuffed grape leaves, and we would hear stories, and seemed like that was the only time my mom would reveal something. We're like, Ma, you never told us that. And, it would be this really beautiful experience. So, I think Baba represents the art, also heritage, And again, just sort of wanting to deflate those stereotypes.
Yeah, like the stories and it's like water like Diwali. You know, remember the movie like water like chocolate? Just
I love it.
The food kind of food.
That's awesome.
Yeah. One question from Cecile. I think Cecile is Cecile Sarouf, I think, from California. In approaching a publisher, what other Arab American novels would you say compare to your novel in contemporary literature today? Okay, you can invite a comparison if you would like, but also we had in our conversation, but very quickly, issues about defending the book, fighting for the book. Can you just tell us about, in terms of sort of relating your book to other novels that may have been inspirational Arab Americans, and then also the other aspect of this, the line. There was something you were telling us about, an aspect of the plot that some publishers or agents didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'll say this: I appreciate my Palestinian American counterparts, but not because they wrote this kind of a story. So I can't think of any that I would compare it to, but I love their courage. So they allowed me to basically hold on to my vision and to not sacrifice my vision. I would say that writers who maybe deal with the complexity of family, immigration things, I'm thinking of like Leila Lalami, but she's Moroccan American, but then also Susan Moadi Darraj. So I really identify with her shorter stories. She's not yet written a novel length, so definitely. So yeah, I guess she would be the other Palestinian American, and she's also someone who I write with. So she's like my writing partner, and we exchange work, and that's been just so amazing. So shout out to Susan Moadi Darraj, and someone, it looks like in the chat, said Susan, super awesome. She is. And let me see. So I also love Susan Abul Hawa, but Susan Abul Hawa, she's mostly been concentrated in like the Palestinian setting, but again, the courage to write those stories, right? So I would say, I don't know that there's another book that's exactly, I've had people compare Muslim American writers to me. So for example, the author of A Place for Us, and I'm sorry, her name is escaping me, but she is, I believe she is Pakistani Muslim or Iranian Muslim. And that is a great compliment, So in terms of the industry, I'll say really quickly, agents and publishers wanted me to drop The Shooter. So they loved Afaf's story, but they really wanted to package this as an immigrant story, which quite frankly was insulting because she is second generation. She's the daughter of immigrants. But again, it was this need to package it in a way that did not, that was palatable to them and to white audiences. And I just wasn't having that. So.
Good for you. That's really good.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ryan Ramkilawan, 2 questions, and I will end with them. And
thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Yeah, thank you, Sahar. You're really generous. When you said you have the process post-Trump era, how far have we gone? How much do you need to go in realizing how far we came to that point? I guess how close we came to the point of Trump, or how far we've gone beyond Trump. You can maybe like is because also, I mean, this came out during the Trump years, and so a Muslim ban, etc. So in a sense, and thank God, say, well, maybe we may never hear about any school shooting, but somebody mentioned Christchurch in my class, that this was more like the Christchurch in New Zealand shooting than it is anything in America.
It was,
but yeah.
Yeah, it just we talked about this a little bit privately, Khaled, about fiction foreseeing history and that kind of thing. Here's what I'll say about that really quickly, and I think this comes from me being an educator. I think the work needs to be done in our classrooms, because I think that's going to be maybe the safest space for students, and I think we're going to have to reckon with this and at a much younger age. This idea that, and I'm thinking of race, for example, the idea that, but we want them to have a great childhood, we don't want to burden them with this. is, I think, really problematic. Now, I'm not saying that, there are certain things that are appropriate. It really depends on the age. And then it's also this balance of joy. So even with Black trauma, for example, there's got to be, Black magic. I love that whole idea and that whole concept. We've got to balance it. But there's a lot of work to be done, and I don't think it's going to end. I think what Trump determined is that we've actually arrived. Like we have all contributed. I think we're all complicit in Trump. And so this idea that, well, it's just him, he's the one who, no, he's the one though, maybe, who made it okay. Right. I think we can say, but we all, I think, have a responsibility in that. So again, I like to say this book can't be, I want it to be part of the conversation, but it doesn't answer the questions that we have to basically answer in our immediate communities, in our schools, in our churches, in our mosques, in our synagogues, and all this. But yeah, we're not going to be able to move ahead before we can get at, I don't want to say the root, but we need to go back. We need to go back to the beginning for sure.
Okay, well, I would love for us to continue this conversation, but I think we need to stop here. I think there's only one question, but maybe for another time.
Thank
you so much, Sahar. Really appreciate it. What a gift before Ramadan.
I know. We're all,
And really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who's stayed with us. This was a great event, and I think we've recorded this event, so hopefully we'll post it somehow, and you'll be able to revisit it. And if not read the book, do so. It is gorgeous. The paperback's just coming out. Okay.
And with your endorsement, Khaled, I'm so happy. So
you got me hooked on. It was the first book I've ever read on
the Kindle.
On Kindle, and that month I read, I think, 9 novels. I've never done that before, and since graduate school, maybe. I don't think I've done it before. Not since, but anyway, it was great, and I really appreciate it. It's a beautiful book. Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.